What's up, everyone? Alex here, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. I recently had a really odd sort of gender questioning somewhat recently that ended up not really mattering in the end. I had this interesting gender crisis where I was questioning the Neutrois part of my identity, and then it just ended up that I was really overthinking things. I think that I like to consider like the what ifs of my gender, where it's like, okay, but what if my Neutrois gender ended up doing something else or being on a like different kind of spectrum. And I had released published a YB3 zine about this very topic, and I talked about how it's possible that the gender I call Neutrois, which has kind of always been like an almost placeholder sort of identity, like it's definitely neutral, and Neutrois is like the closest that I can think of. I thought that maybe that part of my identity actually kind of moved along a neutral to Maverick spectrum. Not really a centrogender, but a gender that is in between and moves between those 2 points. So I thought about my neutrality moving toward and away from that feeling of neutrality, depending on, I guess, any given day. Because I have an overall Maverick quality to my gender. I'm trans Maverick. So I just thought that, is it like both my genders are Maverick in some way? Is one of my genders Maverick? Is only like the Neutrois part Maverick, and that's why sometimes that area feels a little more nebulous. But really at its core, I have always called the Neutrois part of my identity neutral, generally among the neutral spectrum. Even if I decided to call it something else, I'm pretty sure it would still be very neutral in nature, just given like how my overall gender feels and how that part of my identity affects the rest of my identity. I talked about having like a soft masculine presentation because it's masculinity blending with that neutrality, and feeling like I'm a demi-guy because I'm mostly male, and then that neutral part of the gender sort of subdues it. So it's always been neutral. I've always talked about neutrality even before I mentioned or came to the conclusion that I was Neutrois. Even before that, I was considering other neutral-aligned identities, neutral-aligned labels that I could kind of fit into that space. Part male, part something else that I knew was neutral. So I don't know why I went through this strange kind of gender questioning, because Neutrois, it feels very intangible to me, kind of fuzzy. Not really a UN gender, which is unknown in nature. Not really gender ambiguity, but just vaguely neutral and sort of out of reach, which would not fit the experience of Maverickity or any kind of Maverick identity. Maverickity is very strongly felt and does not have like intangibility or vagueness. It doesn't encompass any of those types of experiences, which I guess is why I thought, the neutral to Maverick spectrum, sometimes it's intangible and sometimes it's more tangible and strongly felt. So I kind of like released an issue of the zine where I like talked about sort of the possibilities of the Neutrois side of my identity kind of going through like phases or changes, and like feeling like that part is sitting between 2 different types of identity and is kind of not exactly a blend of them, but can move within and outside of them. I don't know where. I even like looked into other words that's not Neutrois. I discovered the word neuter, and I didn't realize that people use that as a term for themselves. It's actually, it seems like it's kind of used as like, yes, not male or female, but also kind of gender ambiguity rather than androgyny, where it's like there is no defined label here. There's no defined sense of gender. It's just that it is not male or female, and it's a type of unlabel, so it's a refusal to like use a specific type of label. It's similar to when you use the label both or neither. They're unlabels, so they're not specifying a specific kind of gender experience. And I brought that up as a potential, like, if I'm not Neutrois, maybe this, but I don't vibe with gender ambiguity. It's not my particular experience. There is still a distinct feeling of genderedness, just overall. And Neutrois does not, the neutral part of my identity doesn't feel like it's ambiguous at all. So that kind of scratches that off. Another unlabel is the label other, which just, it's nebulous and it doesn't indicate anything specific, but it's also not inherently neutral. So it might not be anything that's like particularly fitting. I'm looking at a post that I put on the YB3 blog just questioning my neutrality, but then I just kind of came back to it kind of came back to like there really isn't anything going on with the neutral side to my identity. Like, I'll still call it Neutrois. It's still neutral, and it's not anything outside of convention, really. Like, there is no exogenous part of my bigender experience. So, I don't know what I was on about. I go through some very strange phases of questioning things, and then I sometimes kind of pull it back, and I'm like, well, maybe that wasn't a thing after all. But the questioning, the confusion, and the trying on labels is definitely part of the trans experience sometimes. Sometimes it's like just a what if, and then you kind of come back and you're like, oh, it wasn't that was entirely unnecessary. It's just that like I was wrong in a sort of way. I did follow up on the YB3 zine, and I talked about how I always have this bad habit of splitting my identity into two, which you would think is like, that's a bigender thing. But I see them like, I would see them as entirely separate things. Like the male part, the conventional part, being separated from the neutral part. So I'd talk about them as if they were two unrelated things. And I forget that there's like such a huge overlap in the center that like it doesn't make sense to split them and decide that like Neutroi's like the weird part. It's the unconventional part. It's the nebulous part. It is like way out there, whereas like my the male part is like very concrete and strongly gendered and like more within the norm or more within conformity. And the two can never like blend, sort of thing. Like, I have a very bad habit of kind of thinking of it as two separate things. And I talked about accommodating your own gender. Like, if you have multiple genders, having a set of pronouns for one gender and another set of pronouns to like accommodate another gender, having specific ways of expressing yourself or presenting yourself depending on each gender. So it's like you have the look that matches the one gender and the look that matches the other, whichever that may be. And I forget that some people have more of a blended or murky or overlapping experience, and not everybody has to categorize things. I think I just have the kind of brain that really needs to like categorize things and make sure that everything fits in its own little like cubby hole sort of thing. And I mean, you see it with the way that I archive my own identities, my own neo labels on the YB3 Wiki, and how I like organize all my flags and this and that. Like, just categorizing is my thing. So in the Neutrois category, the A-binary category, I felt the need to like kind of other it from the rest of my identity. But that's just not how anything works. Which is like, I always say that, like, there's always nuance, and it doesn't always work concretely the way you think it's going to work. So that's my recent experience of weirdly questioning my gender, which just happens in waves sometimes. Sometimes I'm sometimes I just think like maybe there's something else there that I haven't like looked into. Like, I like looking into all of the different possibilities of gender and expression and like all the little what ifs. I keep moving my mic because I'm looking at the audio readout and it doesn't look like I'm loud enough, so I'll probably have to fix that in post. But that's pretty much it. I know a couple of these recent videos have been kind of short, mostly follow-up topics, revisiting topics. That's pretty much what I'm doing as I lead up into Pride Month. I know we're still in April, but Pride Month's coming up in a couple months, so I'm kind of leading up into, like, there is a point. Basically, the videos are leading up into, like, I revisited abinarity, I revisited otherinity, and then I'm leading up into Maverick Visibility Day because it is pertinent to my coming out as trans Maverin. And then it goes into Pride Month, where I talk a lot more about my own personal experiences, and I revisit some key topics that I talked about like a couple of years ago on the channel. Just seeing like how I feel now versus how I felt then. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. I have like a whole schedule for most of the rest of the year like planned out ahead of me so that I'm like on top of the game. So that is pretty much it for this video. Yeah, questioning, it can be a mess, and sometimes it doesn't lead to anything. It doesn't lead to any kind of concrete solution. It's just I thought about the what ifs, and then that was that. I came back and I was like, well, that didn't lead anywhere. There's nothing new. It was just a self-exploration exercise. But coming to the conclusion that you're not a certain gender also is very helpful in gender exploration, self-exploration, identity-related stuff. Like, it's nice to know what you're not. Like, that's kind of where I got started, was a list of what I'm not. And that's how I narrowed down a lot of these weird gendery feelings that are so common in the non-binary community. So yeah, that's it. I'm signing off for now. See you later.